Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a really fundamental shift in how we approach language learning. I want you to think back to your school days for a second. So many of us, right, have been totally conditioned by the traditional classroom model to believe that speaking is this sort of final reward. Like it's treated as this ultimate prize you unlock only after years of quiet, rigorous study, filling out endless workbooks, and passing written exams. But the source material we're analyzing today, it flips that completely upside down. It challenges literally everything we were taught. Because the core premise is this: speaking is not the final step of language learning. It is the main step. Let's start by addressing a very real and honestly a very universally shared frustration. Have you ever felt this? You spend months, maybe even years, diligently studying grammar rules, memorizing these massive vocabulary lists, and acing complex written tests. You feel prepared. But the exact second you find yourself in a live, real-world conversation, your mind just goes completely blank. You probably know the visceral feeling of the freeze. Sweaty palms, that sudden amnesia where words you knew perfectly well just 5 minutes ago completely vanish, and you can't even form a basic sentence. It's incredibly frustrating. But as we'll see, this is not a failure of your intelligence. It's definitely not a lack of effort. It's simply a lack of the right kind of practice. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to take a really cool journey today to understand the true mechanics of fluency. First, we'll look at the silent learning trap. Second, how language is actually a physical and mental workout. Third, the power of mistakes. Fourth, building the daily habit. And finally, changing your identity. Starting right off with section 1, the silent learning trap, and why grammar books simply aren't enough. Consider two very different types of learners for a moment. First, you've got the silent learner. They study grammar diligently every single day, mastering all the intricate rules in their textbooks, but they never actually utter a word out loud. Now contrast that with the daily speaker. This person actually knows way less grammar, maybe they barely scratch the surface of advanced verb tenses, but they talk every single day, making plenty of mistakes along the way. According to the data, after just a few months, the daily speaker will absolutely outperform the silent learner. Why is that? Because taking consistent action builds real, adaptable confidence and neural pathways. Silence, on the other hand, it only builds passive knowledge that just completely disappears under pressure. The source material uses this brilliant analogy that anchors the idea perfectly. You cannot learn to swim by reading about water. I mean, just think about how absurd that would be, right? You can memorize all the mechanics of the butterfly stroke from a manual. You can study the complex physics of buoyancy. You can even ace a written test on pool safety. But until you jump into the pool and actually move your limbs against the resistance of the water, you aren't swimming. Well, language works exactly the same way. It's a highly physical skill. You literally have to get into the water, splash around, and start moving. Which brings us right into section 2, a physical and mental workout, training your mouth and your brain. And this brilliantly illustrates a crucial concept. Your brain learns English, sure, but your mouth must learn English too. Different languages use entirely different facial muscles, tongue placements, breathing rhythms, the whole shebang. It's exactly like training for a physical sport. Think about the English th sound, like in the word the or thought. If your native language doesn't have that sound, your tongue literally does not have the muscle memory to produce it naturally. If you've only ever read English silently, your mouth muscles are quite literally out of shape for the sport of speaking English. You have to physically train them through repetition so you can make those specific sounds without straining. Because without that physical practice, you fall right into what's called the slow translation trap. And you probably know this feeling all too well. First, you hear the English spoken to you. Then you frantically translate it into your native language in your head. Next, you formulate your answer in your native language. Then you translate that answer back into English. And finally, you speak. This slow mental gymnastics routine absolutely exhausts beginners. It makes smooth conversation basically impossible. But by talking out loud daily, you force your brain to build direct pathways. Eventually, you skip that whole clunky translation process entirely so you can react naturally and instantly. It really comes down to the difference between passive and active knowledge. Silent reading only creates passive knowledge. That means you can recognize a word when you see it on a page or hear it in a movie, but you can't recall it on demand in a fast-paced conversation. Think of passive knowledge like having a really useful tool, but it's sitting at the very bottom of a dusty toolbox in your garage. You know you own it, but you can't reach it when you actually need to fix something. Talking, however, takes those words and physically moves them into your active, long-term memory. It puts that tool right into your hand. When you use a word out loud, you truly own it. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how we look at failure. Section 3, the power of mistakes, rebranding fear as feedback. It is time to fundamentally rebrand our relationship with failure. The source material emphasizes this really powerful truth. Mistakes are not the enemy of fluency. Mistakes are the path to fluency. Every single fluent speaker you admire, they've made thousands, maybe tens of thousands of mistakes to get there. Think about a baby learning to walk. They pull themselves up, they take a wobbly step, and they fall down, over and over. They don't sit on the floor feeling incredibly embarrassed, vowing to never try walking again because they looked foolish. They just get back up. Those falls are just necessary data points for the brain to figure out balance. Your speaking mistakes are exactly the same thing. Yet for some reason, as adults, we unfairly punish ourselves for these standard, totally unavoidable parts of the learning process. So we need a massive mindset shift. From now on, try changing the internal narrative from "I made a mistake" to "I learned something." I mean, what happens if you mess up a verb tense during a chat or use the wrong preposition? Actually, nothing. The world doesn't end. The person you're talking to doesn't storm off in anger. Just correct yourself calmly, smile, and keep the conversation flowing. Remember, human connection and the exchange of ideas are always, always more important than robotic perfection. Let's look at Section 4, Building the Daily Habit. We're talking actionable steps for every single day. It's time to shift to the practical daily strategies so you can start speaking every day, even if you're completely alone in your room. So here's your actionable checklist. First, talk to yourself. Narrate what you are doing. Yes, you might look a little crazy to your roommates, but narrating your breakfast preparation is incredibly effective. Second, take a short article and read it out loud to train those mouth muscles we talked about earlier. Third, shadow native speakers by repeating exactly what they say, matching their rhythm and tone in videos or podcasts. And fourth, ask yourself quick questions like, "What do I want today?" and answer them immediately out loud. Honestly, just saying simple sentences out loud like, "I feel tired," or "The weather is nice," provides powerful, low-stakes daily practice for your brain. So the crucial point is how we define confidence here. Real confidence isn't having perfect grammar or a flawless, native-sounding accent. It's simply feeling comfortable expressing yourself, flaws and all. And here is the real secret. Confidence doesn't magically appear before you start speaking. You don't wait around to feel confident so you can speak. Confidence is the result of taking action, surviving the conversation, and realizing it wasn't nearly as scary as your brain thought it would be. Action breeds confidence, not the other way around. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Changing Your Identity, moving from a learner to a speaker. Let's move to and see how this builds our ultimate transformation. We are shifting from the old identity, the mindset of "I am someone learning English," to the new identity, "I am someone who speaks English." Now, why does this matter? Because human beings always act in accordance with who they believe they are. When your identity is just a learner, you naturally prioritize studying in silence, kind of preparing for some imaginary future date when you'll magically be ready. But when you break the silence and talk every day, using those actionable habits we just covered, you prove to your brain that you are already a speaker. This profound identity shift changes your daily behavior, removes the pressure, and accelerates your natural fluency faster than any textbook ever could. You've got the tools, you understand the physical and mental mechanics, and you know that silence is the only real barrier standing in your way right now. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to spark your practice right this minute. What is the very first sentence you are going to speak out loud today? Make it a good one. Thanks for hanging out with us on The Explainer, and we'll catch you next time.